So what's the pitch?
Label interviewing RFK.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here with an amazing advocate, and he ran for president. Didn't you run for president? You ran for president? You did? Yeah. And he's talking about like medicine and all these things that are bad for you and health. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., because your father was also Robert F. Kennedy. Oh yeah, so you named after your father. We don't do that we wait until they're dead, but I guess you did it before he was dead, and now he's dead. Ladies and gentlemen, RFK, thank you so much for having me. Mislabeled, which is a problem with a lot of products these days in pharmaceuticals, is that they're severely mislabeled. So why do you talk like that? We have a very special guest here at Ami's house, in my actual house, Shabbos Kestenbaum.
Hello. Hello.
He's a star, baby. He's a star.
Shabby,
Hi.
we had a nice little summer camp together. It was a birthright for Instagrammers. Just came back from a delegation through the Israel Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
If two influencers get married and have kids, what does the state do for you?
What is the what?
The state do for you?
From that trip?
Yeah.
They give us Gaza.
Well, we'll talk about that. So very cool. We just came back from a delegation, and I was going to save the recap because I knew Shabbos was coming on. Mm-hmm. Let's do a little unpacking of initial thoughts, because I remember you're coming. You when I met Shabbos on this thing, he's like, "I'm not an influencer. What is this?" Because there's a difference between people who are like on. There was like, it was well casted because you had people who are really on Instagram, some purely for advocacy purposes, and some from accidental advocates, sort of like myself, and then Twitter people like you, Eyal Yacobi, who like have names, but in a particular sort of way. They're not like making content, but Twitter is its own kind of universe. So initial thoughts.
Yeah, I don't have a beauty product to sell. I'm not on social media professionally. The only thing I've gotten from Instagram is someone sent me this kippah, which is pretty cool. So yeah, I was a bit hesitant when I'm a paid Zionist shill. Yeah. I mean, they brought us to the King David Hotel, so we are in their pockets.
I give you all this kippah for all of your service. Thank you.
Please don't thank me.
So I was somewhat hesitant because I'm really not a social media or content creator. I'm a student and I give speeches and I complain a lot, but ultimately I'm not really creating content. But it really was a fascinating trip. And we spoke on the bus a lot about, is this preaching to the echo chamber? Are we really creating a difference? But the reality is twofold, and you sort of enlightened me to this, which is number one, sometimes it's not necessarily a bad thing. I wouldn't say preaching to the choir, but really strengthening and providing enthusiasm to the base. But on the other hand, many of us really are reaching a non-Jewish or a non-Zionist or non-pro-Israel community. And it really was somewhat empowering to be able to go to Nir Oz, to meet with Irit, who tells us about how she was hiding behind a locked door, hearing the sounds of the RPG. And we can go back to our communities and say, we saw this with our own eyes. This was her experience, and we want to tell that story. So it was somewhat empowering, and I'm really happy that I was able to take part in that mission. Yeah,
I mean, there was often this thing kind of looming over some people's heads, sometimes like things to be conscious of, which is all this time that all of us have been talking about anti-Semitism in Israel over the last year and a half since October 7th, you get this negative backlash of people who are like, who's paying you? Zionist shill. He's working for the IDF. None of that is true. None of that was ever true.
I wish we were getting paid.
Until now. No, but so then when you're invited by the official government of Israel and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to go and, show what's going on, tell the story or whatever, or give an experiential perspective of what's going on, you can hear the idea of like, this is just propaganda. I mean, the government's bringing you around. So everything sort of is invalidated by that if you let that criticism get to you. And at the same time, who cares? At the same time, they're not telling us what to say. And Israel is this weird informal place. It's this tiny little country. Israel is the Jewish state, meaning it's part of this community of Am Yisrael, of the nation of Israel. We're going there as almost like an expression of gratitude, like bringing family members of the Jewish community and non-Jewish community and people who've advocated. And up until this point, no one asked me to do it. And everyone was like, don't tag Israel, don't show that it's Israel. Some people were concerned about if we show that we're through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that somehow invalidates what we're doing. And I'm like, if you try to hide what we're doing, then they're winning the argument.
Yeah,
You know?
I would also say that even though that it was a government sponsor trip, even though we weren't being paid, it does not negate the reality on the ground.
Correct.
So regardless of who's paying, who's sponsoring, when we went to the Kerem Shalom border crossing, for example, and we saw some of the dozens of the more than 800 humanitarian aid trucks that are going into Gaza on a daily basis, that's real. That's happening on a daily basis. And people need to be able to tell that story. And they told us, I'm sure it's fine to say now, but they told us, yeah, we don't really want Western journalists to see this. We don't really want people in the Israeli public to necessarily know about it because they might be really angry when they see that we are providing 800 humanitarian aid trucks into Gaza. And we spoke about this. There was a young Israeli soldier standing to the left of me as we're watching these trucks go in. And I asked her, how do you feel? Are you conflicted? She says, of course I'm conflicted because my cousin's a hostage. I said, what? She says, yeah, my cousin is Don Alexander, who's the American hostage still being held in captivity by Hamas.
Wild.
So that's a real story. And I think the Israeli government does themselves a tremendous disservice when they don't animate or they don't amplify those narratives because at the very least, it humanizes what's happening in Israel, but it also shows that so much of the propaganda we see from the anti-Semitic and anti-Israel coalition is just that. It's propaganda. It's not based in fact.
Yeah. I wanted to just add that I'm curious, Michael, your take on this, because is there something that always bugged me throughout as we're doing it, that this posture of look, we are good, look, is sort of already ceding the territory to like, we need their approval in order to be justified in what we're doing and what Israel's doing in defending itself. And not only does Israel have to defend itself, it has to defend defending itself. And from that position, I was always icked out. So I tried to take a different perspective and just share how I was honestly feeling about stuff. But it wasn't for the purposes of gaining the approval. It's more, that's why I think turning to the echo chamber that already accepts Israel's justified defense of itself, it's more like, you can feel okay. This is for strength. This is for solidarity. Not, oh, you hate Israel? Well, look at Kerem Shalom, the crossing. And they're like, oh, you know, forget Intifada revolution. I am so down with Israel because I just didn't realize, as if their positions are based in fact and reality, don't give the satisfaction of showing reality as if that's going to change their mind or persuade them.
Yeah, well, you guys got a front seat to, I guess, the inner workings of a process that's not working very well, right? Like, did you, I mean, like they haven't done
the Hasbara or whatever?
Yeah, they haven't done a good job.
Which we did not use that word ever.
Translating this war to the rest of the world so far.
It's definitely true. Having said that, I remember on the last day, as we were headed into the airport, it kind of struck me, regardless of your political ideologies, regardless of your feelings about how the war is being operated, ultimately what this trip accomplished is we showed up. And I think that's one of the messages of, regardless of how you feel about Israel, show up. Just go there. And you can ask questions and you can be confrontational and you don't have to agree with the government or certain policies, but just seeing it in your own eyes. And that, of course, is really animated by the fact that so many on our college campuses, certainly at the Ivy Leagues, they don't show up. They've not been to these places. They have not explored what it means to be Israeli, what it means to navigate having rockets being fired into your home on an almost daily basis. But
do you really believe
I honestly do. I honestly do. No, because people often say, well, look, a lot of these people are not interested in engagement. They're interested in their political ideologies and their echo chamber. And you're not going to be able to sway or convince them. And I think that's certainly true for about 10 to 20% of the campus or 10 to 20% of the populace. But there's like 80 to 90% of college students, of the American people, that either they don't really know, or if we're being more honest, they don't really care. And if we can somehow get those people to interact with Israelis, to pick lettuce on a farm or something, so they can experience Israeli culture, so they can experience Israel as a country, I do think you would be able to capture a lot more hearts and minds.
It definitely highlights for you when you're there in person that, oh my God, all these people screaming across college campuses are so passionate and so disengaged. They have no skin in the game. They don't really care. They care about caring about something. And they're getting behind this as the flavor of the month, because once you're there, you realize there's this asymmetry here. Those of us advocating for Israel are very connected, are here in person, have family here, and we're arguing against an ignorant mob of zombies that don't.
Yeah. Well, maybe you could tell us this. I also imagine the college encampments as most 99% like white chicks. I mean, having
white doughy lesbians.
Are there more people literally connected with family or themselves from like Gaza, like more than we realize?
Well, just quantitatively, there aren't a lot of Palestinians on college campuses, especially on Ivy League universities.
They were displaced.
So they exactly they were displaced from the campus.
Yeah.
So yes and no. A lot of the encampment leaders were the stereotypical, almost comical, blue-haired lesbians. You definitely had a lot of that. You also had a lot of Arab students. Arab students. The Muslim Student Association was, of course, very passionate. Right. But to be, I don't say fair because that's not the right word. But to animate this in I think a kind of scary way, it really created a broad coalition of peoples and groups who really don't see eye to eye on most issues. Palestine really is this omni cause to the left. And I saw this great tweet once that
what is omni cause?
An omni cause. In all purposes. I understood it. I haven't heard the word. It's a good word. It's a Harvard word. Omni cause, right?
I don't want to brag or anything.
Yeah, like an all-purpose cause that they can all get behind?
Exactly. Palestine is sort of the last piece of the puzzle. If you care about settler colonialism, if you care about reproductive rights, if you care about LGBTQ plus equality, then Palestine is the key to all of that. Even though, of course,
a lot of abortion clinics in Gaza, but yeah.
Exactly. Even though, of course, that isn't the case. But somehow, if we can create an Israeli government that is at its knees, if we can liberate Palestine. I mean, people talk in the classrooms at Harvard and Columbia and NYU of genuinely the people of Gaza returning, even though they weren't there to begin with, but returning to Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and eating the oranges from the orchards, and all the Jews have gone back to
Jaffa.
Brooklyn. Yeah. Right? They genuinely believe that this is a realistic timeline that can actually happen. And that's why you have a group based in New York called Within Our Lifetime. They very much see the eradication of the Jewish state as a plausible political goal that could be achieved in the next few years. And
are there any other states they want to dismantle?
No, just
the Jewish
just
one?
Israel.
Interesting.
I mean, to me, one of the most fascinating protest slogans during the encampments was not the Intifada, was not River to the Sea, was when they started chanting, "I believe that we will win." And I don't actually think the media really picked up on that. But to me, that really solidified that this was a game. There are winners and losers. And if we just disallow Jews entrance to the library, if we just smash a few more windows at Columbia, we will be able to win, that the great omni cause that is Palestine will succeed, and we can have this great march of return where we will unlock the doors in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and Ra'anana. And they have been deluded into this fantasy, and of course it's propagated by the university professors, it's propagated by our media, and sometimes it's propagated by our policymakers.
Hot damn, spicy meatball. And that's why this guy's up and coming. You heard all that.
You're a damn inspiring speaker, I have to say.
I just complain a lot.
I want to show up.
Yeah.
I should show up.
No,
show up.
Just to wrap up on the delegation itself, I felt like it felt like this little Avengers thing where these different kinds of folks, Lahavdil Avengers, right? We like show up from these different universes of the internet.
Don't sell yourself short.
What?
Don't sell yourself short.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, you're a hero.
Thank you. Well, at one point, Norman Finkelstein came up and tried to snap and kill all of us. Doing the Thanos. He's like, we need balance. Balance. And there's nothing you can do. Oh, no. I'm trying to think of a good Thanos.
Thingies.
My thingies. I want to have... Listen. I want to have Shabbos. The fact that your name is Shabbos is an abomination. I don't even keep the Shabbos.
By the way, did
what
you
about
see
Yontif?
Beitar, this very far right Zionist organization, gave Norman Finkelstein a beeper in the streets of New York 2 days ago.
That's really
an actual
they
beeper.
bumped into him. Ha ha ha! Very. Oh,
no, it was not laced with explosives, but it was an actual beeper.
That's really
wow! I love that.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. He deserves the ridicule. But what I was saying is, we're pulled from these different corners of the internet, and I'm like meeting people. I'm like, oh, I know you. I know you. Like everyone's had their little sparring moments on Twitter or Instagram. Their little, and it was cool. And it risked being this kind of crazy. Like it wasn't too icky or ego-y or anything. Everything was very substantial.
I remember you saying that, and it was true because you would imagine there's a lot of ego. People have a significant amount of followers, and maybe we're not worthy, but everyone, every single person on that trip were just an absolute delight to meet and to work with, and they're really passionate about what they do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, take a guy like Yechiel Jacobs, the comedian with the wig. When we were at Soroka Hospital, when we were at the Farm to Table, people were really invested in this story and trying to amplify what's going on and what we can do to create a real difference on the ground.
We went to the hospital in like Soroka, where that was the hospital on October 7th that everybody came through, because it's the only hospital in the area, and so like 800 something casualties coming through all day
and they
long.
took us to the room where the released hostages will go to if they need for medical intervention. It was
powerful. It was
Did you ever just look around the room at any points and be like, I finally found my friends?
Me?
Yeah, or any of you. Like, these are my people.
Look, it's funny because you're immediately thrown back into this like old version of yourself when you're on a bus with people I mean, you're younger than I am, so maybe your memory is fresh.
Like this was summer camp.
But you're like there and you're like, oh my God, everyone falls into their roles. There's the guy who gets on the speaker and orders people around. There's the jock. There's like the Jap. There's
we were the cool kids in the back of the bus though. Me, Ari Ackerman, Zach H. Fox.
No, but everybody, but it was like this cool kind of like everyone falls into the sort of old,
the quiet girl.
Yeah, exactly. Who on the end all of a sudden has this huge personality.
Exactly. She gets like a little drunk.
And all of a sudden you're like, whoa, you're an animal. No, but it was just super fun and super nonstop. But it was cool. That's why they do it too, to give you, even the creators of the stuff themselves, the content generators of this, have a community and to all have something in common. You know, everyone has their like ring lights and their things, but it's just you learn from different things on like techniques on how people tell stories, and people were throwing up, these selfie sticks with these like and like there were lav mics everywhere. But that was inspiring. It's cool to see like the hustle.
I watched it from afar. I mean, it did highlight this kind of new I don't even know what to call it. Yeah, it's like a new space. You're not journalists, so like going on a propaganda tour really isn't a problem. You're not journalists. And like you're influencers, but you're not like speaking directly to the Palestinian community. Like here and there, you're right. You like cross over and like you have your moments, like you and Candace, and like you obviously like all over the place at the RNC and everything. But it is sort of this internal like chizuk machine almost. Like I think you called it the base, but like it's important that American Jews support what's going on over there. It's not a small thing,
right?
And so even if you are just talking internally, it's like this cool weird new space that does need support.
And the second we can see that it's for the people who hate us or detest us, I don't think it is, if we're being honest, because they're not going. There's the people who kind of want the solidarity and strength of a message and to be reminded, and then there's that in between who the both messages are coming at. I think it stops there, but there's people who are like, I'm not aware of the situation or what's going on, and I'm hearing all these different messages. So there's like a malleable middle of like people that you're trying to reach also, and then beyond that, I don't worry too much about needing the approval or whatever.
Yeah, that's interesting. I also want to go back to a point you sort of alluded to, which you'll remember, whether it was staying at a hotel, whether it was meeting people from near Oz or going to different organizations, there really was a deep sense of appreciation. And I say it's unwarranted because, what are we doing? We're happy to do this. But even the hotels, there are very few people staying there. There are very few tourists. There are not a lot of people going to the farms. There are not a lot of people going to the places that we went to. And there was such this deep sense of thank you for allying yourselves with us. And again, we would do it anyway. It's just who we are. Not because we're just so great, but the American Jewish community, of course, stands with Israel. And it really, to me, solidifies what we were saying earlier, which is people kind of just need to show up and literally go to Israel. I mean,
and bringing your IG clout with you.
Exactly.
Voila!
No, I remember
100,000 followers from my farm is amazing.
No, like after October 7th, it was a little cynical, all these like solidarity missions. It became like a business. You can make a lot of money taking your young Israel to Israel and pick lettuce for a few days. Having said that, a year and a half after, the state of Israel is still suffering. The war is not over. And I think people really appreciated that Americans were not only showing up, but showing up with like Israeli flags and saying, yeah, we really want to be here. We see ourselves in you. I think people were really touched to hear that.
That's true. You were like one of these people throughout who was like, kind of the thinker, the academic, sort of considering and being all interested.
I was figuring out who I could sue.
Being all reflective and introspective. Maybe the critics have a point.
I gotta sue someone.
It was quite nauseating. But were you nudged in any particular way, let's say politically, about this coming in? Because at the end, you then tweeted when we got home.
Oh yeah, I deleted that tweet though.
Why?
Only because they said that I violated X's terms of service and they would suspend my account.
He's all like, I'm just gonna sum this story up because this is funny.
This is very bad.
Shabbos and I are going back and forth. He's trying to consider, because the thing is, and we should talk about this also, like you meet these people who were attacked on October 7th. their relatives, neighbors were murdered. People, their loved ones were kidnapped,
and they drove Gazans into hospitals.
Yeah, and they were just betrayed, and all of that. And at the end of the day, they're still like, we need to find a way to coexist. We need peace. We want to, like, they still kind of hold on to this ideal because they feel like if they let go of that, then Hamas wins and steals their humanity. Now, I disagree with that conclusion, but a lot of the Israeli left almost will never let go of it. And I think it's just that they have to believe it for this optimism because they have to live amongst it and have to figure out a way to coexist. But you were kind of considering that too. But then at the end, he tweets upon getting home a picture or image of one of the hostages being released surrounded by a mob. And he goes, every single one of these people have to die.
Hey, let me
like
clarify.
Of the Hamas people.
And even,
let me clarify.
Even Elon is like, too much.
Elon.
Yeah, Elon Musk.
Yeah,
See
yeah.
that tweet,
Yeah.
like, too much.
No,
Sean, too much.
it was all the Hamas people cheering.
Exactly.
People with phones. You're talking about the people in that image.
Exactly.
So shut up. But he says that. I'm like, Shabby, you come around quick. So tell me.
So let me be clear. The video, I think it was a Gomberg. I don't remember which hostage it was, but she's surrounded by Hamas, by PIJ, and they're taunting her. They're throwing things at her. And so I post with this video, I said, I have a solution to prevent October 7th from happening again. Every single person in this video should be killed. And obviously it's phrased in a very distinct and harsh way, but I was not referring to civilians or kids. I was referring to the specific people in that video who are Hamas members. I took it down because, as I said, I was told it violated X's terms of service. I actually texted Eyal Yacobi because he's very big on Twitter, and I said, can I call for the murder of terrorists on social media? Does that violate the terms? He said, yeah,
Are you announcing a new lawsuit against Twitter on this
Not
podcast?
yet. First, we're going to win the lawsuit against Harvard, and then we'll go to Twitter.
Okay.
But broadly speaking,
Yes,
I
your
think I told you
positions.
about this.
Yeah.
I'm always reluctant to opine on internal Israeli politics because I think we support the land of Israel, we support the Israeli people, but to start dictating governmental terms or governmental policies that we agree with or not, I just don't think it's very helpful. So as it pertains to the hostage deal, I tried not to say my thoughts out loud. Having said that, I'd probably fall into the more reluctant camp who are not so enthusiastic about the deal. At least I did. And then when we got to Israel and we met these people, and I agree, many are just idealistic to a fault.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I think there are two fundamental truths with this hostage deal. Number one,
They called
the
it
deal-
suicidal empathy.
Suicidal
that Israelis have
empathy,
suicidal
exactly.
empathy.
Who called it
This
that?
was a phrase that was like circulating when a left-wing journalist, left of center journalists would talk about this, that there's a problem here with Israel and it's suicidal empathy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As in when you go to places where women were fearing being raped, where their neighbors were kidnapped, where the only thing saving them from certain death was a small rope that they tied to their door, and they say, I believe the path forward is peace. Regardless of what I think, many would consider that to be this type of suicidal empathy. So as it pertains to the hostage deal, I think there are two fundamental truths that will always exist and will always be in tension with each other, which is number one, the deal on paper will allow Hamas to stay in power. And number two, the deal on paper is literally the only way any of the hostages will return alive. And I think if Israel was not able to defeat, which I'm using that in a very broad term, if they weren't able to defeat Hamas in a year and a half, I don't see why we need to continue to try to defeat them right now. Get the hostages out first, because their time is finite. Defeating Hamas, which again can mean many different things, that does not require it right now. You can do that later. That's my
Live
take.
to fight another day.
I feel the same way. And the goals of the war were always at odds. They were mutually exclusive. You couldn't defeat Hamas and get all the hostages back, I think, to begin with.
It's hard to say. I'm not a military tactician, but the whole thing is what people were really frustrated about was not the deal. It was the past 15 months and American policy towards Israel during this war arriving at this deal.
Yeah, and
so you can't take the cherry on top that's really like difficult and complex and not ideal and re-prosecute the war a different way. What you can't do is go back in time. So now here is where we are. And I think actually judging by Trump's statements a couple nights ago, you kind of get a sense of, something else was discussed too, which I don't want to skip ahead, but I feel the same way. It was like, look, at the end of the day, we need some momentum. We need people to start coming home. And maybe if Israel was more aggressive in the very beginning, it could have worked differently, but it couldn't for a whole variety of reasons. One of which, from my understanding, is that the American position was a lot of exclusive pressure on Israel to not
100%.
escalate, which is why people had to leave the north, why they couldn't attack Hezbollah until 11 months in. Why did they just let that happen? I asked a friend of mine who's a soldier. He's like, every single strike in the north must be approved by the American ships and military to provide coverage. So it was like, we don't want escalation, so they couldn't do it.
First of all, let me agree 100% with what you just said. And
Nice.
Maybe this, maybe he paid me to say that. Maybe this isn't so nice to say, but we were at the president's house. We met with the first lady. And we met with Rachel
Herzog. Yeah.
And
yeah.
I'm not going to try to assume what's in her head, but her son was on one of the lists, and this deal could have been reached months ago.
Yeah.
And maybe I won't speak for her, but for the many parents who could have had their children returned alive, I can't imagine what they're thinking, because there was no reason that this specific deal, which, let's be honest, is more or less what Biden proposed in May, more or less, it could have been reached a lot sooner. And I do agree one of the reasons it couldn't have been reached on the Israeli side is because, yes, they were stonewalling aid to Israel.
Yeah.
They were pressuring the Israeli government and barely mentioned Hamas. They were never talking about ways to get rid of the military infrastructures inside of Gaza. I agree the pressure was almost exclusively on Israel and on Bibi. At the same time, there is something to be said that the deal that Trump proposed is in many ways identical to what was proposed.
Different president, though, which makes a big difference. Who
Different
we're starting to deal with is very different.
Pete Hegseth said just yesterday to Bibi, we've already taken off any of the delays to armaments. Trump is talking about we're going to take over Gaza. So I agree, very different president, very different rhetoric.
Hearing you talk about, I'm having trouble placing you because you look like the caricature of an East Coast elite. I know you used to be super liberal. What you just said sounded like pretty anti-Netanyahu, and then you're talking at the RNC. Like where
you're playing both sides, Shabby.
Where do you place yourself these days?
Well, first of all, I'm meeting with Bibi tomorrow, so I have to be very careful about how I answer the question.
You want me to prep you?
Exactly. So I always make a point of saying that I registered to vote as a Democrat the day I turned 18. I volunteered for the Jamal Bowman campaign. I voted for Bernie twice. I was at
you had your head examined.
I was at the 2016 Democratic Convention as a supporter for Bernie Sanders. I'm happy to compare my progressive credentials any day of the week, which I know is not saying much compared to you two.
At least say Clinton, but Bernie, my God, what a
180 industry shill now.
What's that?
Exactly.
He is?
Yeah, he voted against RFK, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because,
of course, now I support Big Pharma.
Yeah.
Bernie, yeah. That's
So,
quite,
there are fundamental
quite a
liberal,
leap.
there are fundamental liberal policies I still subscribe to. I believe in aggressive actions to combat climate change, which I know we spoke about and we're at odds with. I believe in a strong federal minimum wage. I believe, to some extent, reproductive choices for women. I also believe, I'm going to redeem myself. I also believe we can't talk about those things if we're dead. We can't talk about those things if there are 7 American hostages in Gaza, if Jewish students are being physically assaulted on their campuses. And while my values have not fundamentally changed, and I know that's a Kamala Harris line, but with my case, it's true. What has changed is the prioritization. Post-October 7th, there's been a reprioritization of my values. And while I still believe in many of those liberal things, I also believe that things like a strong foreign policy, that national security, those things are paramount. And to see the most educated, the most elite, the most liberal and progressive, those who introduce themselves with preferred gender pronouns, who took knees for Black Lives Matter, 34 student groups at Harvard University on the night of October 7th, from the Bengali Dance Association to the Feminist Club, they wrote this letter.
The BDA?
The freaking BDA.
Oh my gosh.
They wrote this letter
Bengali
on
Dance
the
Association.
night
BDA for BDS.
on the night of October 7th, blaming Jews for the massacre, and then spent the next year and a half talking about the need to globalize the Intifada. There is something so fundamentally broken in the Democratic Party, my party, and within the liberal ideological space. And I cannot continue to march with those people. I cannot continue to hold space, which is their term that they like to use, with people who ultimately, at their core, seek the eradication of the Jewish state. And when I spoke at the Republican convention, I took pains not to endorse Trump, and I got into a lot of trouble. But in my speech, I only mentioned Trump's name once, and it was in passing. It was to say I endorse President Trump. I support President Trump's policies to XYZ.
Liberals getting red-pilled in real time. Keep it going, Shabby.
And then the Democratic Party
starts with the policies, and then you're on the train.
And then the Democratic Party decided to nominate an atrocious candidate, Kamala Harris. And then I decided, you know what? I may not agree with President Trump on everything, but American electoral politics are a binary system. Either he wins or she wins.
Non-binary,
Right.
Yep.
And there was only one person who showed up for the Jewish community. I helped accompany President Trump to the grave of the Rebbe. Kamala Harris didn't want to show up. Only the Republican Party wanted to spotlight Jewish students facing anti-Semitism.
You were at that little thing with the Rebbe and Ben Shapiro?
Yeah.
You were there?
Me and Ben were standing next to each other.
He said the Rebbe.
The Rebbe.
The Rebbe.
Yes.
I forgot, man. You've been at all of these.
How did you get involved in that?
I got involved with the Trump campaign.
Mhm.
I don't know if surrogate is the right word, but I would go to different Jewish communities across the country, and I would try to make a case as to why, even though I'm a liberal and even though I'm a Democrat, President Trump is the only option, not just for the American people, but for the Jewish community.
Do you ever like half-ass anything? Just like
Probably. I guess my Instagram, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
content creators told me how to like finesse the algorithms. But look, people often call me a sellout. I get criticized nonstop. But ultimately, my biggest concern is my community. And I think in the same way the African American constituency should vote in their best interests, and the same way I think the LGBTQ plus community should vote in their best interests.
Still thinking like a liberal. Yep.
I think the Jewish community should vote in their best interests.
Yeah.
And it is a very good thing, whether you love Trump or hate Trump, that 45% of New York jury voted Trump, that 44% of Pennsylvania jury voted Trump, that 41% of Ohio jury voted Trump. Why? Because we are now in an electoral force to be reckoned with. And if the Democratic Party wants to win elections in the future, which honestly I'm not so convinced they do, but if they do, they would make concessions to us in the same way they make concessions to literally any other group in this country. And if they don't want to do that, that is their prerogative, but they will continue to lose elections. Do not be taken for granted. And that's not just true of the Democratic Party, it's also true of Ivy League universities. I cannot tell you, I speak across the country, really the world now. I go to Canada, and I do speak
My
engagement.
Shabby's doing wonderful.
And the amount of parents who come up to me and say, no, we need to send our kids to Columbia and Harvard and Penn now more than ever.
Oh yeah, I want to ask.
I
about
mean,
that.
it's shocking. Why go to institutions where at best you are not wanted? We are so much better than those institutions, not just the Jewish community, the American people.
Like
They're
genetically.
So much better. Yes, we are inferior. That is the point I'm trying to make. But again, I'll say this one last anecdote. I'm sorry if I give long answers,
Yeah.
but whether you love Trump or hate Trump,
That's
the
your
day
specialty.
after the day after Trump was reelected, Harvard University professors canceled classes. They baked lemon squares for their students. They had Sunshine the Puppet console students. They had story time with Marty. They had basket weaving and free massages. That's an institution that we should propagate, that we should pretend is worthy of our kids and
Wait,
our
wait,
time
wait, wait, wait.
and our money.
Free massages.
Free massages.
Well,
When you
can't
put
knock
that-
it all.
you might have got to Harvard had you known it.
So I cannot tell you how many billionaires and hedge fund managers and CEOs have told me, Shabbos, we really don't want to hire graduates from these places. And I think that's actually a really good decision to make, unless those students explicitly and publicly either denounce their universities or articulate that they are pro-America, pro-West. They despise the anti-Semitic encampments. Don't hire places from those institutions.
Yeah.
Let's get into it.
Yeah, let's get into it there. I want to go
Okay.
into the origin
So
story.
we're done with the delegation trip.
I think so.
Okay.
Well, we were off there. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
We're naturally moving. It was a great. This is how we
That was
connected.
good. That was good.
This is how we connected IRL in real life, as they say.
It's true. Can I just say one last point?
Yeah.
I walked out of the hotel in the King David, and as I'm walking out, I walked out of the elevator. As I walk out of the elevator, I see Ami. I'm like, oh my God, I know that guy. So I was a little starstruck.
Oh,
So,
and
yeah.
now you're in my home. How
And
do
now
you
I'm
like
in
that?
your home. Yeah, we're just
Yeah.
friends, but we are.
And I was
moving
like,
pretty
oh
fast.
my God, that's that kvetcher over
Yeah.
there. We all felt.
Jew.
Everyone was like, where do I? Oh, this.
Yeah. Sorry.
Take us to the origin story a little bit, because all the conversation around the college encampment and college culture around post October 7th, what was happening for the Jewish community. We were sparring headlines, coverage, clips. Did you see that clip? Did you see this? You were there, right? At Harvard at the time, like experiencing this as a student. And that's what, right?
Was it undergraduate or graduate?
No, graduate. I got my degree in religion and politics.
Yeah.
At Harvard?
At Harvard.
Also?
I'm getting my master's degree.
So you're at Harvard
Okay.
Divinity School.
Mhm.
You're on campus as this is all happening.
Mhm.
Just a little bit of a summary of a detail of like the kinds of things you were seeing, which were obviously not two states, we hate Israel, but much deeper, much more dark than that. Because obviously I saw the viral clips, but talking to you in person, we didn't really get into this. But what sort of was your springboard into this whole space?
First of all, it's critical to make the point that this did not happen on October 7th and afterwards. This was building for years.
Mhm.
I always bring this story back 100 years ago. The president of Harvard University was a man by the name of Abbott Lowell, and President Lowell was an anti-Semite, and he wanted to institute quotas, a legalized metric of discrimination to cap the amount of Jews on the university.
What year?
And this is in the 1920s and 30s.
Mm.
And not only that, to me, the most damning part of the quotas is its shocking relevance in the 21st century. At its peak, Harvard was 25% Jewish. Today, it's 4% Jewish. It's not because Jews got dumber over time. It's because there's been a deliberate and systemic campaign to crack down on the amount of Jews. And we can talk about the curriculum, we can talk about the professors, we can talk about the political indoctrination. But suffice to say, I wrote an article for H.com called Antisemitism at Harvard, and I wrote it in October of 2022. And I was trying to raise the alarm bells, but no one was really interested in talking about it. No one was particularly concerned. Even after October 7th, you know how many times people, both from without and within the Jewish community, have said, you're exaggerating, it's just anti-Zionism, it's just, free speech issues. Even after the disastrous December 5th congressional testimony where Claudine Gay gives the infamous context-dependent answer, even then it was so difficult to try to tell people that we are treated qualitatively different than every other minority group.
Was that true pre-October 7th? Do you really felt Jews were being treated differently?
Of course.
How so?
On October 7th, all that came out was it was evident and it was blatant and it was, obvious. Whereas
besides admission standards, besides like admissions and quotas and trying to create a more like diverse student population and that disproportionately affected Asians and Jews, let's say, like what are you seeing socially, culturally?
I'll give you just one quick anecdote, two quick anecdotes. Number one, there were swastikas being drawn on the undergraduate dorms. This was years before October 7th, and Jewish students reported it.
What's
and it was
the context?
Right, it depended on the context.
Might have been a Hindu thing. Yeah.
And Jewish students reported it. It was never discussed. There were protests. One of them were violent outside of the Harvard Hillel. This was years ago, and it was never discussed. It was never spoken about. But I'll tell you one personal anecdote. The very first month of me being a student at Harvard University, the Harvard Palestine Solidarity Committee, which is the largest compilation of intellectually challenged morons I met in my life, they decide to invite Mohammed El-Kurt to come to campus. This is a
Don't be ableist.
This is a guy who has seriously and openly professed that Jews eat the organs of Palestinians, that the Israeli occupying forces have internalized the ways of Nazi Germany. If you have the misfortune of being on Twitter, he lamented how sad it is that Palestinians can no longer hijack planes anymore. He just posted a video saying that all Zionists must perish. He appeared on the Anti-Defamation League's top 10 anti-Semites, which is pretty impressive considering the competition.
Yeah.
And so we went to the university and we said, look, you have a strong track record, rightly or wrongly, of disciplining speech you don't like. The Foundation for Individual Rights and Expressions, FIRE, they ranked 248 American universities 3 years ago to how well they committed themselves to free speech and the First Amendment. Harvard was literally ranked 248th. They were ranked dead last. This is not an institution that has any historical track record of caring about free speech. And I can give you examples to bolster that case. So we said, why don't you apply that logic? You've disinvited other speakers in the past. Why won't you disinvite him for his anti-Semitism? Oh, he has a First Amendment right. It's a shocking double standard. It's blatantly anti-Semitic, and as we'll prove in court, it's discriminatory.
Who are you literally speaking to when you say that?
We were literally speaking to the interim president at the time, to DEI, to my personal dean at the Divinity School.
Okay. And what's the vibe?
No one cared.
What's the vibe? You're going in what's the vibe when you're talking to them one-on-one, face-to-face, bringing this up? Well,
they don't
is
care.
It the spineless jellies?
Look, I know I sound conspiratorial or perhaps even biased, which would make sense, but I'm telling you, they did not care. Even after October
Did they pretend
7th,
to care?
Now they pretend to care because they know that they're getting killed in the PR front.
Right.
Sort of like Israel in that sense. Maybe they
But
should
did you feel like this
delegation
Did
to
you feel this
Harvard.
passive not aggression, the opposite, sort of passive like of course, thank you for bringing it to my. Did they even try to pretend?
Not with me because they haven't responded to me in a year and a half.
I see.
But with other students and other faculty, yes, very often. But another point to make is fundamentally a significant amount of these professors, a significant amount of these deans actually believe that what they're doing is right. And when we issue complaints or reports for anti-Semitism, they genuinely think that, what are you talking about? I mean, I was told, and I'm happy to state this on the record, and when we go to discovery and when we go to depositions, I will gladly show this to the American people and to the judge and to the jury.
Do it here on Ami's House. Debut. Show me the Project Veritas undercover footage.
I issued a complaint to one of the deans at Harvard Divinity School saying that there was an incident of anti-Semitism, and she responded, that to me is not anti-Semitism. And I responded saying, would you ever tell this is, a white old woman. I said, would you ever tell an African-American when they issued a complaint on racism, that's racism to you. I don't think it's racism. Would you ever tell an LGBTQ plus student, that's not homophobic, come on. But you feel so emboldened and you feel so comfortable telling a Jewish student what is or isn't anti-Semitic. I mean, it's shocking.
Right.
Shocking.
And then this is all pre-October 7th.
Yep. And again, I'm happy to produce all of these emails. Harvard's lawyers should know about it, even though they're incompetent, but I'm happy to show it to them whenever they want.
What are you suing them? What's the lawsuit?
So essentially, the crux of our argument is blatant violations of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, which more or less, in a nutshell, prohibits public institutions that receive federal funding from discrimination based on 3 classifications. One of them is national origin, which is really where the Jewish story comes into play, because we're not just a religion, but we're also an ethnicity. We're a people. And President Trump signed an executive order, Executive Order 13899 in 2019, that really solidified.
Remember Adela?
Yeah, because of Adela Kochab. and actually spoke at
Oh
NYU.
yeah, she did that, right.
Michael, we're in this. We are following the trajectory. We also had Greg Lukianoff on a fire, by the way.
Right,
So he's a previous alum of the pod. Anna Della, who she got it through that
Yes.
to include Jews as a class in Title VI.
Exactly.
That is officially the
Yes.
law now.
Yes. I actually spoke at NYU
Standing
Law
on the
School.
shoulders of giants.
Yes, I spoke at NYU Law School last night, and I made a point of saying this is where it all began.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
Thank you NYU to the anti-Semitism.
And
You made this
Della,
happen.
she's going to like that shout out.
And the crux of it is Executive Order 13899.
If that hadn't been passed, you'd have no lawsuit.
We would have a lawsuit, but it's a lot stronger because of this executive order. Adela's was the first case of its kind of a Title VI claim.
Yeah.
And because this executive order was not in place, her lawsuit didn't really go anywhere. But what the lawsuit did do is set a very strong legal precedent and then, of course, lead to the executive order. And that's what we're building off of. We're building off of what Adela did years ago. So without her, we would not
We
have
gave her
a
the
case.
shout out.
Okay, sorry.
It's
No
fine.
more Adela. You're great.
We'll bleep it out. We'll bleep it out.
Okay, thank you. So we also have another complaint, which is essentially a broken contract.
Yeah.
So when I pay tuition, which I don't, I'm on a scholarship. But if I were to pay tuition, we expect
brag.
that was for any potential shidduchim who are listening.
Scholarship.
We expect in return educational opportunities and a modicum of protection and safety. And it is obvious the case that we have had a lessened educational experience, and Harvard has violated their own contract. So in addition to federal
But everybody
law,
could sue on that in college, no?
they should. I recommend it. In fact, there are trans athletes. There are women athletes who just yesterday sued Harvard University over their inclusion of trans athletes at an NCAA swim meet 2 years ago.
Well, we took care of that. You saw
exactly,
that?
and they used that executive order.
Wow.
That's why they waited till yesterday.
Do you think they regret that scholarship so badly?
You know what's funny? You know what's funny? Not only am I on a full scholarship, Harvard actually paid me to go. They gave me a stipend, and they're probably thinking, these freaking Jews. We give them money, we give them a house, and they sue
You're
us.
like, I'm going to take them down from the inside.
Is there a part of
They
you?
hate Jews. I don't think Claudine Gay was anti-Semitic,
No.
but she's definitely anti-Semitic now.
No,
you know?
I see. So that's a question I have. Like, remember how we spoke about with regard to the delegation? Like, people have been accusing us of these things, and then we just kind of own the brand of like, yeah, we are advocating for Israel, and Israel, the government is bringing us out, and there's nothing wrong with that. Do you worry a little bit about, in your mind, the smears thrown at Jews, that they're trying to game the system, be litigious, do all these things, and then you're like leaning into that stereotype, if there's a better way to say that? I don't
Not
know.
at all, because I've been very vocal, and I'll say it again, that if Palestinians or Muslim students feel discriminated against on their campus, then I would gladly support them, and I will help them file litigation against their universities. As I said when we first filed it this time last year, this is not just about Jewish students, but this is about giving a voice to anyone who's been on the receiving end of discrimination, of persecution, of bigotry, and hatred. And if any student feels that they are discriminated against because of their race, their ethnicity, their politics, then yes, they should hold their universities accountable. The judge of our case, Judge Richard Stearns of the Federal District Court of Massachusetts, if he thought we were just trying to game the system, if he thought we were just trying to smear and make a quick buck, then why did he allow us to go to trial? Why did he reject Harvard's double motions to dismiss? Why did he say in part, quote, the facts as pledged show Harvard failed its Jewish students? We're not gaming the system. We are alleging obvious and evident cases of discrimination.
Right.
And that's why we're the first case of its kind to go to trial.
And do you think this will help the relationship between Harvard and the Jews?
Well, I don't think there can be much more that can hurt the relationship, that's for sure.
Okay.
Look, if Harvard wanted to combat anti-Semitism, if they wanted to help their Jewish students, they would literally do it right now. There's nothing preventing them from expelling the students who violated state and federal law and accosted a Jewish student at Harvard Business School. There is nothing preventing them right now from disciplining the faculty who've created incubators of hatred and political indoctrination. There's nothing preventing them from having an independent third monitor, but they literally won't do any of those things unless they are forced to in the court of law.
This is the last resort. You've tried all the other things. You tried
course.
to be nice.
Of course.
This Jew has tried to be nice.
Again, and
Yeah.
I'm happy to show it to the jury, and if Harvard's lawyers, again, they're incompetent, but should they ever get their act together, I'm happy to show it to them. I have email records of trying to work with DEI, trying to work with some of the deans at Harvard Divinity School, and they were at best unable and at worst unwilling to do anything to rectify the problem. We filed the lawsuit in late January. We gave them 3 full months, and they refused to do anything.
What do you say? Like the way I think about this, and I'm this is the reason I'm not suing Harvard or got into Harvard or applied to Harvard. But like, I mean, this place.
Michael paid to go to college.
Yeah, can you believe it? These places were built as like training grounds for like a white American aristocracy, almost like a breeding ground for the intelligence agencies. Like it wasn't meant for minorities and Jews. And then like I guess over the last couple of decades, it's like become this place that's opened the doors a little bit. But like, I don't know. I just kind of think like it was never meant for us. We had a little blip on the radar of history, and great, they let a few of us in, and now it's kind of going back to what it was always meant to be. And like, I personally would be like, so like, let it be. Like,
so yes and no.
Does that resonate?
Except
at all?
that it's inverted. It's not for whites either. It's
Okay.
prioritizing certain minorities in a hierarchical structure over others that they deem to be the ones as the oppressed people, and are giving them and have special kind of privileges and treatment for that, and they put it in this sort of artificial place. So it's not going back to like white aristocracy. If anything, they're
I see that also as a blip, and eventually that also will go away. Like all the DI stuff will also go away, and it'll kind of just go back.
Are
to
you
like,
saying like, just let it be? Let them be a cesspool that rots away. Why make us think?
That's how I feel about it personally.
Yes and no. So first of all, people often forget that in June of 2023, Harvard's admissions criteria was deemed unconstitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court. They found that Harvard was discriminating against Asian American students.
Is that when they officially ended affirmative action?
Yeah, it was a case brought against Harvard and UNC.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
So yeah, it was officially.
It was a case brought against Harvard and UNC by Students for Fair Admissions, and the Supreme Court sided with the students, saying that Harvard was practicing discrimination in their admissions criteria. So when we talk about discrimination or some type of oppression, we're not really making it up. It's not really conjecture because Harvard has a track record of doing it. In terms of, well, we should just let these places be cesspools, I kind of agree with you, but I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can hold them accountable. We can hold them accountable both in the court of law and in the court of public opinion, and also make the case that these are not institutions of value anymore. They might have once been, but if I was a businessman, if I was a head of a corporation, I would not want to hire anyone from Harvard, Columbia, Penn, NYU, unless they stated, as I mentioned earlier, that they denounced their universities, or they can showcase what they were doing during the encampments, they were standing against it, or they stand with American values, because these are incubators of stupidity. I'll give you one last anecdote. About a year or so ago, 14 Harvard students took over University Hall, which is the office of the president and other senior administrators. And they said, we're not leaving until, the genocide in Gaza ends and Harvard divests and globalize the Intifada or whatever.
And you bring us basic humanitarian aid in the form of Uber Eats.
Exactly. So the dean of the college, in an effort to coax them out, gives them burritos and Twizzlers. And, 4 months later, these students are the same ones to organize the encampment. These institutions of higher learning have consistently capitulated and acquiesced to the dumbest elements of society. These are universities that have to hire puppets to console students after an election loss, because these students are so incapable of, forget about disagreeing with controversial ideas, of even conceiving that there could be other people that disagree with them. And you want to hire those people into your workforce? You want to hire those people into your places of business? These are people that we should repudiate.
What if they brought in like the insult comic dog? What's his name?
Triumph.
Okay, you stupid kids, for me to poop on. Trump won, get over it. That would be a nice troll move to bring. We brought a puppet to console you. For me to poop on. Triumph, the insult comic dog. Yes, they failed. Yes, but you're saying we can call it out and then walk away as it
exactly walk into the stand. Every single Jewish student should be able to sue their university to stay. I'm a big believer. And yes, if any other student has faced discrimination, they should do it too. And after we are done, then leave, because we, not just as Jews, but the American people, are so much better. These are not institutions that I hold with any degree of respect or sanctity. I remember before
you still wanted that Harvard grad credential, though, didn't you?
I always took the approach of when people are at those universities currently, they should stay, because we can't placate or acquiesce to the mob who are saying Jews off our campus.
Yeah.
But the best type of remedy is prevention. So students in the future who are not currently there, just don't propagate and increase the problem. But students who are currently there anyway, if they would like and if they feel safe, they should stay on their campus.
So what do you say to like a superstar valedictorian at a yeshiva now who's meant for great things? Like who should be at Yale or Princeton?
I reject the premise of the question that an individual who is destined to great things should therefore go to Yale or Harvard. There are great institutions of higher learning out there.
Only you get to go.
Vanderbilt, Chicago, Binghamton,
but really
Texas
though.
A&M,
Okay, I
University
hear
of
you.
Austin.
Right. Okay.
I am telling
there's better ones.
As I mentioned earlier,
Barry Weiss's thing.
Yeah, University of Austin. As
Peterson
I said earlier,
Academy. Yeah.
I think it's called Barry Weiss's thing now. I think they renamed
it's officially
it.
called Barry Weiss's thing.
No, well, Peterson Academy is different than Barry. What's Barry Weiss? Is she
No, University of Austin. It's like a free thinking left
Free
and
press.
right.
They've raised $250 million in less than a year.
I saw it on 60 Minutes. It looks kind of fun.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
It's like going to a podcast for college.
Oh, I love that.
If I was applying to colleges now, I would probably want to go to University of Austin.
Interesting.
But yeah, there are places.
So not the Ivy League, but the country's other best.
Correct. And
countries.
again, love
Okay.
Donald Trump, hate Donald Trump. The election was a repudiation of the Ivy League values. It's when the American people said that we reject the sense of elitism, we reject the moral bankruptcy and the intellectual hypocrisy, and the American people are already migrating away from the Ivy League universities. Harvard has had a 17% drop in early applications, a 5% drop in applications overall, hundreds of millions of dollars in donations being rescinded or withheld. They're on the cold open of Saturday Night Live. As I said, I know very successful businessmen and billionaires and CEOs who've said to me to my face, Shabbos, we don't want to hire these students from these schools anymore. No one has ever made those comments about Vanderbilt and U Chicago and Binghamton.
Shabbos, do you practice speaking with a metronome? Because the speed
don't.
is impressive.
Yes.
You did time yourself with a question, though, in one of those, in the session, you put a timer on?
I did, yes.
Was that just for fun? What was that about?
No, I didn't want to take other people's time. And
he put a
sometimes I
time. He had a
ramble,
question for
so-
someone. He was like, and he.
I was very punctual. Something Jewish content creators can learn.
Yes.
Being punctual. That is my one criticism
Yeah.
to them. All right, we were late to everything.
We were in Israel too. Things were changing constantly. But
We were very late.
I did hear, Michael, you had a question?
No, go ahead.
No, I did speak to someone who was at Columbia throughout all this, and she was sort of playing the opposite of the less hysterical. She was trying to say it's overblown. I had a lot of great teachers at my school. There was a lot of amazing classes. I learned a lot. So a lot of the stuff you're hearing, just like when there's press and coverage of anything, it paints a certain picture. Even the way they talk about Israel in the news, you want to also make sure that there's a sense of urgency of what's going on. But regular life on campus, there's a lot of good to be had. Did you have that too, where there's like, in your experience? Because we speak about it in these like pretty absolute terms that it's completely a
There are
waste.
many Jews at Harvard University who really do not like me personally and don't like what I'm doing because I'm exaggerating.
Right.
I'm creating undue burdens and pressures on them.
Yeah.
They don't like the media attention. They really
Let's
don't like
bring
what
them
I'm
out.
doing. I knew this was a setup. And I know that that's the case of many of my friends at Columbia as well.
Yeah.
Columbia, I believe, is the worst of the worst. It's really a league of its own. But certainly there are many Jews who take the attitude of just put your head down and just don't get involved and who cares? Ironically, a lot of the yeshivish guys at Harvard Law School who I think the world of, I think they're great, but they took the attitude of these are just dumb people and who cares?
Yeah, this is gonna end.
Literally,
I want to make
I
some
mean,
money. I'm gonna have a nice
exactly.
job. I want to make
They're in their class doing
Yeah.
their Amazon warehouse online, pretending to study, and they don't care about the idiots drawing swastikas and the idiots calling for an intifada.
He's a doodly, the little doodle, a bissel of doodling.
And they're not going to talk to the media. And I totally get that approach. I took a different approach, which was we have to confront these people because unfortunately the status quo is one whereby Harvard purports to train the next generation of American thought leaders, politicians. It is not an exaggeration to state, statistically speaking, I probably sat in a room with a future congressman, senator, president, and if these are America's future leaders, I'm telling you, America's fucked.
AOC went to BU, but yeah,
Right.
there was a problem there too.
America's in a dangerous
Yeah,
point. It's at an inflection point, which is why I'm trying to make the argument, stop hiring these people.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, they've explicitly said, yes, I denounce XYZ.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you are propagating a really dangerous cycle that is not just going to harm Jews. It's going to harm the American people.
Do you think the way to persuade hearts and minds is to threaten to not hire somebody, and therefore, unless they change their opinion?
No, because
I
I'm
do
not-
hear a lot of this, and there's an instinct in me to say, look, all of this sort of top-down, let's sue, let's make sure we're counted amongst all the oppressed minorities too, is sort of playing the same game that got us here.
Not at all, because I believe in free market principles, which might shock you to hear.
Do you?
And if you're a
Yeah.
if you're a corporation, if you're a Bill Ackman type,
Yeah.
you have total discretion to decide who it is you do and do not want to hire.
Sure.
And why would I, as Bill Ackman said, why would I ever want to hire someone who lived in a tent for 4 weeks, smoked pot, refused to shower, and called for an intifada? That's not someone I want in my workforce. And I don't see why this is a controversial take, especially because when you apply, especially on a Fortune 500 company, they're looking at your social media anyway. They're doing background checks on you anyway. And I would simply include a very simple question. Do you believe in free market capitalism? Do you believe in Western civilization? Do you believe in upholding American democracy? And if the person answers no to that, that is your right. That's your opinion.
Of course,
and it is my right to deny you a role in my company.
I'm just being self-aware of the culture created around the Jewish community begging to be included amongst the oppressed minorities, perceived oppressed minorities.
That's not my
Is
approach.
that what you're doing?
That's not my approach, and I
Explain.
don't think that that is the Jewish approach. I don't believe in DEI for anyone because I think there is nothing as illiberal and inherently racist as diversity, equity, inclusion, because what it tells minority students is you will never be able to be successful on your own. We cannot rely on your merits. Therefore, we will either dumb down the standards, which is what Harvard did in its admissions criteria, or we are going to artificially inflate your sense of talent and worth.
But it did sound like you were appealing to those principles when you were talking to the people in the admissions and
of course,
the things to say. Yeah,
in the beginning,
when you bought into all that.
No,
crap.
it's not because I bought into them. Because I believe that the only way to change the system was to change it from within.
Right.
And then I realized these are people that you will not be able to convince of anything. And the only way you will ever be able to achieve structural and systemic reform is to blow it up. And that's why I was such a strong supporter of
figuratively.
Donald Trump. Right, figuratively. When J.D. Vance, when he was a senator, he proposed a 35% endowment tax on universities that have more than $10 billion. That is a fantastic piece of legislation, and I will work in any capacity to convince policymakers to bring that bill back for a floor vote. And I'll make a last point, broadly speaking, which I always say, we in this country are suffering from a crisis of accountability, whether it's the southern border, whether it's the subways of New York, or yes, whether it's our college campuses. People have refused to take accountability for anything that they do. And the only way that you are going to deter crime is if there is punishment, if there's discipline, and if there are consequences. So I don't particularly care if individuals think we have horns. I don't particularly care if people think we control the banks. I care if they act, if they manifest those ideals, if they start throwing rocks through the synagogue windows, if they start blocking the entrances to the schools. That is what I care about. And the only way you fix that problem is not by going to a Holocaust museum, is not an ADL dinner, is not meeting some Jewish kids in a school. It's by prosecuting crime. Stop incentivizing criminality and lawbreakers. Because when 160 students and outside agitators at Columbia University were arrested for occupying Hamilton Hall, for vandalizing private property, for trespassing, 145 of them were released the next day.
Whew, I need a break. That was hot. I agree. Yeah, actions. Punishable actions and accountability.
I'm not going to settle with Harvard and pretend that we reached an agreement that Harvard did nothing wrong. I mean, bullshit. Of course they did wrong. That's why we freaking sued them. And by the way, the plaintiffs who did settle with Harvard, they also think that Harvard did wrong, but they can't say it anymore because they signed on the paper. The only way Harvard will change is if we punish them so severely, it would never even cross their mind to treat any other student the way they treated me.
Well, let's just take a breath. I hear your point. Michael?
That was a good answer.
Yeah, it was fair. It was good.
Fair? You don't agree?
What?
You don't agree?
Oh, fair is code word for don't
fair
agree.
is so
It was so much information that I'm still downloading.
Who is like, you don't have to answer this if you can or whatever, but who's funding this and coordinating this lawsuit? And
that's the question I'll get.
Is it a nonprofit thing?
Yeah.
Or is it a personal thing?
So it's definitely not a personal thing. I would have declared bankruptcy months ago if that was
No,
the
but
case.
you've been like gathering allies and people to get involved in this.
Adela also, I didn't understand how she
was able to do
who
it?
is actually suing Harvard.
Who's the lawsuit being brought
how does
from?
that
I can't get into the details of who's funding it, but we have
But you have
people
someone.
who believe in our cause.
Got it.
I originally, when I filed the lawsuit,
And it's not Soros. Yeah.
It's no, it is not Soros.
He's on the other end of it.
Exactly.
He funded the
He's funding
encampments.
Harvard's lawyers.
Yeah.
When we first
Don't
filed,
worry, I know how the Jews work, and I will help you. Yeah. I've never done a George Soros.
I've never heard. I don't even know
He's
what he
not
looks or sounds
Swedish.
like.
No, but he's Hungarian. He sounds like this. I didn't feel bad for what I did. I was a couple.
Not bad.
We rounded people. It's fine. No, I'm turning into my own grandfather. We gotta stop.
When we filed the lawsuit, we were represented by Caswitz Benson Torres, which is an aggressive litigation firm based in New York. They actually used to represent Donald Trump, which I always thought was cool, but given the 34 felony convictions, maybe not so cool anymore. And they were great. I parted ways with them.
I just caught what you said. And you might pay your legal fees. This guy, he holds off for a long time.
We parted ways respectfully about a month ago.
Yeah.
And then I went with the Brandeis Center for about a month. And again, we parted ways very respectfully. I have nothing negative to say about either of those law firms. And now I'm being represented by a firm called Holtzman and Vogel. They're based in D.C.
These names, they sound
Little
awfully Jewish. Yeah.
And I have been very lucky and fortunate to have had the 3 different legal representations that I've had. Really have no complaints.
So it's like Shabbos Kestenbaum v. Harvard University?
Yeah, I think officially it's Harvard University, Harvard College, the Board of Trustees.
Cool. The Shabbos Kestenbaum. Now that you put on a bumper sticker.
But by the way, I would be elated if other Jewish students at Harvard would join me.
Mm.
And I have nothing negative to say about the other plaintiffs who signed on to the settlement. I know why they did it. I have the utmost respect for them. But there are other Jewish students at Harvard University who I've been in touch with in the last few weeks who are interested in joining this lawsuit.
Would that make
Sorry?
Would that make it like a class action lawsuit?
Yeah,
or?
and it would also ease the burden.
A literal class.
So I don't have to be, the spokesman for the lawsuit.
But you are literally that kid in class where everyone's like, Shabbos, just stop. I want to get out of here. Please, I'm just trying to get a grade. Can you stop raising your hand?
Can I actually say something very nerdy?
Yeah.
So at Harvard, you had a cap on how many classes you could take. I think it was 5 or 6 courses a semester. And I wasn't allowed to enroll in other classes officially. So unofficially, I would strike deals with the professors that they would let me go into the class and I would just sit in the back. So I took classes in addition to classes.
Wow.
And you're suing all of them.
And he's getting paid to do it. Unbelievable.
So I'm very proud of my nerdy credentials.
Well, it's unfortunate that you're the enemy of Harvard. You should be the bastion of the exemplary student, no?
It's funny because they always talk about
thirst
Harvard,
for knowledge.
At Harvard Divinity School, they actually have in Rockefeller Hall, they have a plaque. Or I shouldn't say a plaque. They have pictures of student activists, of students who've gone on to get arrested for marches and have, protested at the White House. And I'm thinking, I should be on this stupid wall.
Yeah, they're gonna scrub your name completely.
I'm an activist. I get arrested. Like, what the hell, guys?
Stupid question. At Divinity School, are there not like priests or religious theologians teaching these classes?
I always say that the Divinity School is where religion goes to die.
Right.
I mean, I would imagine, I don't have the numbers, but at least the plurality of students would say, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. Or they're just explicitly atheist.
But what about the
agnostics.
faculty? So
there are some. So Professor John Levinson is simply incredible. He's sort of the last of his generation. He is the hardest class. His is the hardest class I've ever taken. I actually did quite poorly in his class.
What class? You got an A-.
It was no. I did really badly. It was, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, it was the introduction to the book of Isaiah. But the way he teach, I learned Isaiah in school, and of course I know. But the way the way he teaches it and his methodology is so remarkable and is so intellectually stimulating. So there are people like him, but unfortunately they're being increasingly replaced by individuals who get the position by writing DEI statements, by being more controversial than the one before them, than by identifying as social justice warriors rather than academics.
And they're like, all this theology, it's cute.
Yeah. I mean, we have at Harvard Divinity School something called, I think it's called, I don't remember what it's called, but it's essentially every week a different faith-based tradition. They don't say religion, but a faith-based tradition will do a ritual in front of the school. Anyone can go. And we would have like
circumcision?
Not circumcision.
Watch me.
But they would present, some type of prayer from their faith-based tradition. And you would have the Prison Abolition Society, and you would have the Jewish Feminist Society. I mean, it's not serious. It just isn't. And I would be offended, even though I'm not a Catholic.
What is that, like just a conservative minion or
exactly.
something? Exactly.
I would be offended, even though I'm not a Catholic, even though I'm not a Protestant. I would be offended at some of the representations of these religions because it's almost a mockery.
What was the Jewish one?
The Jews were it was two. One it was called Feminist Making Midrash, and the other was the Jews for Liberation, which is the anti-Israel Jewish group. And in fact,
that was the expression of a faith-based thing?
Yeah. In fact, the only active...
So this is called a Farbrengen. Everybody sit down.
The only active, get this, the only active, besides the Feminist Making Midrash, the only active Jewish group on Harvard Divinity School campus, in fact, the biggest Jewish group on Harvard Divinity School campus, is the Jews for Palestine Liberation.
That's the only what? Say that again.
It is the only... Besides the Feminist Making Midrash, it is the only active Jewish group on Harvard Divinity School, and it is the largest one.
Wow.
When I was at Harvard, we started the Jewish Student Association of Harvard Divinity School. It consisted of me and my friend, and we couldn't really get anyone to.
And where's Hillel and Chabad and all of this as
Chabad
this
is
going
great.
on?
Chabad is absolutely
Yeah,
Rabbi Hershey's art.
Shout out. Have a little drink. It's great.
I'd love to see you go.
It's accurate. Great. You had some Tom China on Tuesdays. It's great.
It is very
had some Chinese food. It's great.
I have only positive things to say about Rabbi Hershey Zarchi and Rebbetzin Elke about Harvard Chabad. They were the ones that stood up for Jewish students from day one. If you remember, during commencement, there was an anti-Semitic speaker who said I was called anti-Semitic by power and money because they wanted to keep their power and money.
I saw that.
And the only person who walks off stage is Rabbi Hershey Zarchi of Chabad.
Good for him.
He has real.
Oh, that was what's her name?
care and
That
courage.
author, because they want to keep power and money. I was called anti-Semitic by whatever her name was, but she
walked off
spoke
stage.
like
And
this.
he walked
That's
off stage.
amazing.
Yeah.
I hadn't
So
seen
Harvard
that.
Chabad has been leading this fight.
Okay. Hillel, not so much. We'll leave that alone.
I'll
I
leave
want
it
to
at
get you.
that.
Yeah. There's enemies over there, I guess.
There were some people who were very helpful and nice.
Okay.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. If you've made it this far, we want to let you know that Ami's House is now on Patreon. We love doing extra content, bonus footage with every episode. The best way to support us is to head on over to Patreon, become a guest, and support the show for $5 a month.
If you like watching Ami cut me off, Patreon is a
Patreon.com/Ami's House for bonus content. Thanks so much for your support and become a guest.
So who was the person that convinced you to endorse Trump?
No, I convinced myself.
Yeah.
But the last person I asked, let me restart for a second. For essentially a year, I tried to be as bipartisan or nonpartisan as possible.
Yeah.
Because Trump is such a toxic figure, even if you like him, that he would alienate me and what we were trying to do on behalf of Jewish students from essentially 50% of the country. And so I was contacted, I won't say by who, but a member of the Trump campaign early on. And he was very insistent that I take a stand, and he's been incredible throughout this journey. And I was always reluctant to do so because even though I supported Trump this time around after October 7th.
We all kind of were like, we're doing it.
Yeah, every time I was testifying in front of Congress, I would always make a point of meeting with as many Republicans as I was Democrats. And I would not share who I was voting for. So at the Republican convention, I did not explicitly endorse Trump. And as I said, that got me into some trouble.
Yeah.
Look, I was on Fox News the next morning, and I said out loud, I said, if the Democrats want me or any Jewish student to speak at the DNC, we'd be honored to do so. And I went to the DNC and I gave him a list of progressive Jewish Democrats.
How do you go to the DNC? Michael's wondering. I'm reading his mind.
That's exactly what I was wondering.
I got credentials.
Yeah.
And I showed up in person. And I wanted to show that you guys...
Day of the convention or like in pre-planning mode? Like you showed up at the DNC convention?
I got credentials maybe 2 or 3 weeks beforehand.
And you email someone a list?
No,
one
so
of
I
your
was
contacts?
I was given credentials by a Jewish organization. They don't want to be named.
Okay.
Because they didn't want me at the DNC didn't want me there, of course. I just spoke at the RNC. But this particular Jewish organization, which does activism, which does do combating anti-Semitism, they wanted me there. So they gave me credentials. And I was there in person, and I showed up to all the events, both off campus, so to say, things that didn't happen during the convention, but the morning of, all the
hustle is
anti-Semitism and Israel
unmatched.
stuff.
The
And
hustle
every
is
single
unmatched.
policymaker, every single Democratic operative that I spoke to, I made clear, you guys are bleeding the Jewish vote. And that should not be the case.
There was blood coming out of everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they just refused to take it seriously.
Yeah.
So I decided after Kamala Harris became the nominee that I could not continue this charade anymore. And I felt an obligation to tell people I'm not a content creator, but I do have some amount of followers. And I felt that it was actually a responsibility to tell people who I felt would be best for the country, who I felt would be best for Jewish students. And I wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do. So I asked a lot of people, Ben Shapiro being one of them. And the last person I asked was Douglas Murray, because I was giving this speech at the Republican Jewish Coalition Conference.
Well, Shabby, I'm glad that you are.
At Sheldon Adel's casino. And I remember it was that morning. We were eating breakfast. He had, Fruit Loops or something. And I
Douglas
said,
Murray?
Douglas Murray eats Fruit Loops.
No way. That's
Follow
Fruit
your
Loops?
nose.
Well,
Douglas
it's
Murray eats Fruit Loops.
It was the RJC breakfast. It wasn't like super fancy. And I
No
asked
pun
him,
intended.
I said, I'm giving this speech. That was funny. I'm giving this speech.
Fruit Loops, don't tell anyone. This is my cheat day.
I'm giving this speech in about an hour.
Yeah.
And what do you think? Should I be doing this? And he gave me a lot of positive feedback and encouragement. And he was the last person I spoke to about it. And an hour later, I give this speech.
Anything specific,
Yeah,
substance
I
that he
wanna
said
hear.
that like clinched it for you?
Nothing specifically. It was more of he felt that I had to say what I believed to be true. And if I felt that Donald Trump would be someone who would alleviate the concerns of Jewish students, if he stands up for Western civilization, if he's going to lead through peace through strength, then yeah, I should say it, even if it is uncomfortable, even if other people will be turned off. And I
Also lose the sweaters. It's too much.
Yeah, exactly. And I won't say the synagogues, but shortly after I endorsed, I was disinvited from one conservative, one reform temple that I was meant to be speaking at. And I was meant to be...
They sent them a puppet instead for
exactly.
comfort.
I was meant to be speaking at a Jewish youth organization too, and they also disinvited me. It was really difficult.
Yeah.
He's a good example of someone who, when you do stick to your principles through that stormy period and you do alienate people, if time is on your side and you do emerge as correct, it's much, much better for you and your standing and your career and your audience.
Well,
and like you're rewarded for it later on down the road.
Thank God Trump won. Because
Yeah,
if he
no,
didn't,
for
I'd be
real.
screwed.
Yeah.
I alienated half the country and I don't have any power.
I think you're rewarded for integrity. In the long
Yeah, that's
run.
what I mean.
Integrity
That's
is
what I meant.
rewarded.
Yeah.
If you're saying what you believed all along the way,
And
then that's all you can do.
And he was like, I mean, I know when I first found out about Douglas Murray, he was like this like canceled like person who people didn't want to deal with like wisdom of crowds or something, wisdom of the herd,
Madness of crowds.
Yeah, like his book, he was like this canceled alt-right.
Well, a
figure
lot of
who,
the
like,
Jews
that's
and the
how I was-
pro-Israel discovered Douglas in the last 15 months.
That's what
I've
I
known
mean, though,
Douglas's
yeah.
work since 2002. I don't know. I've been
Wow.
watching his stuff.
Is he that old?
Douglas?
Yeah.
Douglas 67, I think. 72?
No, he is.
No, he's not. No, but he's been, let's say he's 50s now. So in his 30s,
He looks good.
20 years
Yeah.
ago. Oh, yeah.
I don't mean it in that sense. I'm just
Oh,
saying,
he
a guy in
looks-
his 50s, he looks very young.
very, very good. Yeah. better than you. No, he was like in the British press on panels, like criticizing Islam and all this like fundamentalism and radical jihadist stuff. And like, the Charlie Hebdo thing. Remember the Charlie
Yeah.
Hebdo? Like he
Yeah,
was on the
France.
news
All right.
criticizing all these people in the UK. Remember what the UK is now and like how bad it's gotten? He was like screaming from the rooftops for the last 20 years and then wrote The Strange Death of Europe. Like that all is the culmination of what he's been saying for years
Right.
and years on British media. And it was very controversial. Back in those days, you were canceled. You were racist. You were an Islamophobe. All these things. He was on the other side of that for a long time. And then he hasn't been particularly vocal on Israel until I guess it was really necessary to do so post-October 7th. And it's been incredible.
Unfortunately, he's been vindicated, not
Yeah.
just as it pertains to Israel and
All of
anti-Semitism,
it.
but the migration in the UK
Mhm.
and across Europe. I was actually just in Europe last week, and I met with a couple leaders from the Jewish community, and there really is this sense of
In
we only
UK.
have we only have a couple of years left.
Yeah.
We can't sustain this long term.
There was some Brits on our delegation. They're like, "Would you wear your yarmulke in public if you came to the UK? Would you wear it out?" Like, there's also this culture. Remember, we had Alex Clare on telling us about like American Jews have a pride, have an unapologetic posture to them, and then if you go to Europe, it's much more like, quiet,
ruffle
sheepish.
feathers.
Don't ruffle feathers. Stay
I mean,
quiet about it, and it's
my-
dwindling down.
My family's British.
Yeah.
3 of my siblings were born there. My parents grew up there, were born there.
That makes
And
sense.
my dad always experienced a sense of otherism,
Mhm.
a sense of not belonging. And even from a young age, he knew he wanted to get out of the UK. And so he moved to the United States because he was really enamored with the American dream that you can be anyone and believe in anything and
Sure.
you can start a business. And that's what he did. And he runs a successful business. He's the chairman of it. And he can't stand the United Kingdom. And he feels, unfortunately, very vindicated by the experiences he had almost 40, 50 years ago.
Well, yeah, the European and UK spirit, from what I've been told, is like this. They're not as keen on success and being proud of success, and also the anti-Semitism in the UK and Europe runs deep. Like it's old stuff. It's way beneath. It's swept under the rug, but it's like ancient in a way that it's not here.
Yeah, I mean, people forget that Jeremy Corbyn, who was the Labour Party's nominee for prime minister, we're talking less than a decade ago.
Mhm.
I mean, this is someone who called Hamas and Hezbollah good friends of his. This is someone who would lay wreaths at graves of Palestinian terrorists.
Yeah.
And he was the nominee of what is essentially the Democratic Party in the United Kingdom less than 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It's shocking, and it's a damning indictment on the state of not just British politics, but British society.
It's a good thing UK is closer to Israel than we are. They just pop on over. That's kind of what's happening. On the Trump endorsement, now that you're officially a Trumpkin storming the Capitol. No,
No, I was.
You were, now that you can confess that you were there. It's okay. You were pardoned
I'm
recently.
trying to remember where I was on January 6th. And I actually
So you
don't
were
remember.
pardoned.
I was not in D.C.
you were
and I
in the
don't remember where I
Capitol.
was.
On recent events, let's get to that because this is some crazy stuff that's happened in the
Sure
last
enough.
few days. Show enough. What's your reaction to Trump getting up there and saying what I would have otherwise parodied in a video? Stranger than fiction. We're taking over the Gaza Strip. We're going to own it. It's going to be so beautiful. We're going to do such great things there. And world people are going to live there. World people. I don't see why they'd want to go back. It's been a total hell and death. We can't repeat history.
My My favorite line was, "I studied this for many months."
Many months.
I was gonna say years, like months.
It's a demolition site.
Like half a semester's worth. So
I have my feelings. You have your feelings.
Yeah,
let's get
let's
the
hear it.
guests' feelings.
I would say this. Number one, Trump perhaps inadvertently has exposed the intellectual hypocrisy at the core of the Palestinianism that Dr. Einat Wilf calls, which is if they are refugees and they are displaced, then let's get there somewhere safe so we can dismantle Hamas. Send them to Egypt, send them to Jordan, send them to anywhere that they would desire, which, by the way, should not be controversial because that is what has happened in every single war fought in modern warfare with a refugee population. They are safely evacuated elsewhere while the enemy combatants are taken out. That's number one. And if the response is, well, they're not refugees, and Gaza is their homeland, which is what they're all saying on the left and what the Palestinian Authority has already said, then why is it that they are given refugee status? Why is it that the United States, up until Trump's executive order last week, was spending billions of dollars to propagate this fiction that you are refugees, that you will somehow return with keys in hand to your homes in Jerusalem.
You've also been saying this isn't your home the whole time.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
You've been saying it's not your home. You said Israel's your home.
So he's inadvertently
Pick one.
exposed. He's inadvertently exposed this catch-22.
I like
Having
that.
said that, in terms of the pragmatic, practical policy solutions, I don't see why is it that the left has taken up a cause whereby, no, we need Gazan civilians, Gazan women, and Gazan children to stay in Gaza underneath terror infrastructures. We need them to stay there and be used as human shields by Hamas. They need to stay there, otherwise it's
Well, the
ethnic
terrorist
cleansing.
infrastructure is underneath them, if we're being precise.
Excuse me. I do not understand why that is considered the compassionate or even rational response, where we need to keep civilians in a war zone, even the ones who are asking to leave. That to me is not compassionate. That to me is not logic. And again, it really exposes that to the far left and to this liberalism of the 21st century. It's not about what's in the best interest of the Palestinian people. It is about the sole eradication of the Jewish state. That is animating their ideology. That is at the heart of their movement. If Israel wants to evacuate them, it's ethnic cleansing. If Israel inadvertently kills them because Hamas has built the terror infrastructures by civilian areas, then Israel is committing genocide. There is no solution that they will ever accept, regardless, unless it has the complete eradication of the Jewish state.
Cooking.
No comment. What can I add to that? I mean, it's been fascinating also that there's all this stuff around this conversation, Israel, Palestine, whenever stuff flares up, like pre-October 7th, there were these flare-ups, and when the conversation always presents itself, there are these sort of amorphous, unidentifiable wrongs, flaws in the conversation. And one of them is, why does everybody default to this pretend delusional common sense position of two-state solution? We need to, like, it's almost like a reflex that we've all collectively decided, whether you agree with it or not, that's what we say. We still stick to it. And what I think is really interesting here is that Trump is one of these figures that says the thing that seems crazy until it's spoken. And then you're like, you know what? Maybe committing to the same old, tired processes and phrases as things keep happening that prove it doesn't work, maybe sticking to those same solutions is not the way to do it. Yeah. And to say it out loud, Trump is just he has this ability to say these things that we all kind of feel out loud. And then you're just like, wow, why should Israel constantly have to be faced with this choice of compromising its security to live alongside neighbors that wish its destruction, no matter what those neighbors do to demonstrate that they wish it, especially when it manifests in violence against Israelis time and time again, rejections of coexistence time and time again. We then reset the clock, and rather than accountability, we go back to the same exact point as if it never happened. This happened. October 7th happened, not because they didn't have a state, but because they did.
And he's such a genius political thinker that this, and you saw with Greenland also. We both do a podcast. Like, I mean, we know how hard it is to say something in a way where people will listen. And so the idea that
you're not being facetious.
I'm not being facetious. Yeah. For the last 70 years, we've been working under this assumption that a two-state solution is the only viable path forward. Right. And I actually think that's not right. And I think there's another way. Like, people tune out. But if you say, why don't we ask them to leave Gaza? All of a sudden, he makes the same exact point in one sentence, and the whole world is listening to it.
Yeah.
And it's brilliant the way he
also
does
said
that.
we gotta take care of them.
Whether or not it happens or not, now people are talking about alternative solutions to a two-state solution.
Yeah.
So
He did it in one
And
sentence.
he did it with empathy towards Palestinian suffering.
I think that
Yeah, the way he phrased it
Sure.
wasn't punitive. Like, I think that's intentional.
It forces
He
you
said,
to-
"Well, we're going to build it. It's going to be beautiful." Like, it's Trumpian style, but he said it from an empathetic position of why would they want to go back there? Most politicians would say, "We will work out a solution that's awkward." But no, it's hell.
It forces you to make the argument against it, which is hard to do.
Yes.
It goes to the core of what Trump said in his inauguration speech, which he very much sees himself as this peacemaker. He's someone who makes deals. He's someone who brings two sides together. So I agree with you. It actually did come from a sense of sympathy, and we want to rebuild Gaza so it can be, as everyone always talks about, the Singapore of the Middle East. The second point I wanted to make is kind of what you were just saying. The immediate response of the American Jewish communal institutions and the Jewish leadership should be, whether we agree or disagree, give us the alternative. What else?
What have they
suggest?
said?
Right.
The institutional response has been.
The AJC has come out against it, calling it bizarre and confusing. The
we
Democratic
go.
majority for Israel have, of course, denounced it.
Yeah.
The ADL put something out, and they were sort of evasive as to what their position was. I think a lot of Jewish organizations sort of want to do a wait-and-see approach because, look, will there be an American acquisition of Gaza? I'm not so convinced there is, but will this be an interesting conversation for the next few months? Probably. And the third
It does
point
a
I wanted
call.
to-
Yeah, go
The
ahead.
third point I wanted to make just quickly is alluding to what you said earlier, which is
Love that.
I agree I agree in a two-state solution. I really do. The problem is I agree in a two-state solution, but I'm also cognizant enough whereby I know that that's not a realistic position in the 21st century. So in an ideal society, when you have two rational actors who are negotiating, there should be a tit for tat. But when you are dealing with a negotiating partner whose starting negotiation is the eradication of the Jew from the river to the sea, it's hard to really subscribe to a position of
If my
coexistence.
grandmother had wheels, she would be a bicycle.
And that's why, going back to this trip, the influencer trip,
Yeah.
it was so hard to hear from people who've experienced trauma we will never be able to imagine
Right.
and still say, we want there to be peace. We want to coexist, because coexistence is a two-way street. You can coexist, and you may want to coexist, but they don't want to coexist. And you know how I know that?
The problem with that is coexist.
Right. The problem is they tried breaking in your door
Yeah.
and kidnapping your daughter. And that's not hyperbole. They literally tried doing that.
Yeah.
And I'm not so
And you drove them to the hospital
and
for
you
cancer
drove them
treatment.
to the hospital. And
Before
I'm not
that.
so convinced that you can continue to coexist with people like that. I believe the Palestinians deserve to live in peace and harmony. They should have self-expression, the freedom of movement. And I also believe we can't do any of those things so long as the people they elected, Hamas, is still in power, which is why, for the life of me, I cannot understand the intellectually challenged morons on college campuses who refuse to condemn Hamas, because there is only one power that is detrimental to the freedom and the prosperity of the Palestinian people, and that is Hamas. But they will not condemn them. Instead, they will celebrate them. They will propagate them. They
crazy.
will normalize them. If you care about the Palestinian people, then join humanity, join people of conscience, and call out the terrorists who have subjugated their people for 2 decades, that have built terror infrastructures and tunnels and have weapon caches underneath schools and hospitals and bedrooms.
We know. Here's the thing. Also,
Preaching to the
we
choir.
talk about how, like, look, Israel won these wars that they were wars of aggression against it. Israel won both times. People have to accept that, and for some reason, in Israel's case, people refuse to accept history. But the funny thing is also, if you just zoom out, the Arab world won the Middle East. Blip. Jordan's 60% Palestinian. Then you got Lebanon, Syria, all the surrounding countries. It's funny to think about Israel as the victor when it lives in a neighborhood that's mostly Arab. And yet, like, I always find that interesting that I don't think that point gets driven home on us. I know we say, like, Israel's size of New Jersey, whatever, but when you think about who's tipping the scale in the Middle East, just zoom out, and it's kind of interesting that you have Jordan. People say there's already a Palestinian state. It's called Jordan. And for the size of Israel, if now we're thinking outside the box, Egypt, Jordan, the countries that caused the 67 war, the 48 war, bearing no responsibility to resettle people who are the victims of it as refugees. And I know the pro-Palestine side doesn't accept that premise, but who cares? In other words, there's never a conversation about the regimes and the countries that perpetuated the wars of extermination against Israel to be responsible for the refugees that came as a result of it. And now we're pushing that conversation.
Yeah, at the very least, whether or not they stay in Gaza, which I'm sure they will,
Yeah.
but like now we're having that conversation, you're forced to ask those questions. I also think when they go back to the negotiating table now, a victory they can bring back to their people, Hamas, is that, hey, we're staying in Gaza, which was
That's
before
always Trump's
was the
tactic.
taken, right?
Yeah.
Right.
There can be no solution to the Gaza conflict, to the war in the Middle East, to just peace in the region, unless that solution requires the total dismantlement of Hamas. And that's why I'm somewhat encouraged with the Trump administration, because yes, leaving aside the whole rebuilding Gaza, or the American army is going to take over Gaza, I don't know. But what I am encouraged is the fact that there seems to be this unanimous opinion. Mike Waltz, the national security advisor, Marco Rubio, Pam Bondi, Mike Huckabee, of course, that Hamas will not rule the Gaza Strip. How will that happen? That's a fair question. But everyone agrees that this cannot continue. I don't think you will see an Israel of October 6th again. It's just not possible.
Right.
One last point. Like, as a Jew, to see the president of the United States sitting next to the Israeli prime minister, like so emphatically, like offensively defending the Jewish state, was like really quite a moment to see.
And he pushes in Bibi's chair for
yeah,
him.
no qualifications, no nothing. Just like,
And they made a media post about it. They did a social media. Our great countries have come together with the music. It was beautiful.
It was.
There is something to
My
be
daughter's
said.
Jewish. I didn't plan it that way, but I'm glad it happened. Did you hear him say that?
He said that, yeah.
My daughter's Jewish. Yeah, I didn't plan it
He said
that
that
way.
at the Allgemeiner dinner a couple years ago. Yeah, I think there's something to be said that Joe Biden took him more than 1,300 days to invite Bibi, and it took Trump, 3 weeks?
And we take like crumbs in the pro-Israel world, and we're like, okay, oh, look, they had him there shaking hands, and he's like, boom, middle finger to the Middle East, like, and he's like, and the reporters don't know what to do, because they're trying all the same things of like the gotcha questions. They don't work on Trump because he don't give a fuck. They don't work. And what, will they be able to go back there? Why would they want to go back there? It's a hell. And they're like, are you the one saying they should go back to hell? Like, there's anyone who's underestimated the man, give me come on. Why would they want to go back there? It's hell. It's been dead. We got to learn from history. Like, it gives you permission to say the things you have to, that need to be said to provide some clarity on this issue.
I complimented Trump a lot. I'm not like a Trump fan. I don't like vamp for Trump. But after like he defeated 3 Democratic candidates, like. You have to stop dismissing him as like a moron.
Stop.
You have to.
Well, we're way past that.
Yeah.
No,
not everybody is though. Not everybody is. I mean, watch the Daily Show.
It's
watch
shrinking,
anything.
right? They're losing.
It's shrinking, but it's still there. Read the New
it's
York
funny
Times.
to see the clock. It's funny to see the culture reset back to like a 2016 model of like now the Grammys are all these anti-Trump and like they're in the opposition now as opposed to winning. And it's funny. It's like you haven't learned anything.
Yeah.
You're doing the same thing again.
Oh my God.
Although to be fair, I just had an interview with a Israeli journalist, and she was trying to understand the campus scene as it pertains to Israel and anti-Semitism. And she said, well, do you see the same reaction in 2024 with Trump's reelection as you did in 2016? And I said, honestly, not really. Look at the Women's March. The Women's March of 2017 had 1 million people
Grab
in DC.
them by the pussy hat. Yeah.
The Women's March in 2024 had, less than 100,000 people?
It's true.
I think many people either
I don't
come
know what
around to
happened.
the idea of Trump, or they sort of recognize that maybe Trump isn't the problem, but their product we're selling is shit.
Yeah.
I'm still a registered Democrat, maybe because I'm a masochist or Stockholm Syndrome or something, but I'm not really willing to give up on the party just yet. I think for American democracy to flourish, you do have to have 2 competent parties at minimum. And the party is in such disarray. If you saw, I'm sure you both probably saw.
I noticed it at the inauguration too. I was walking through the streets and I was looking for protesters. All I saw were
Very
MAGA
few
hats
people.
in different colors. And there was this one little group of pro-Palestinian, anti-American, praising the Luigi guy who killed justice for
United Healthcare CEO.
Luigi.
Yeah.
And they were like 10 of them. Like the last zombies. And I'm like, strength in numbers, folks. I was trumping them. Strength in numbers. Look at you. Such a great crowd. And they were pathetic.
Largest crowd to witness
It does feel like the Return of the Jedi, not the Empire Strikes Back.
I think
you know?
so. And again, if the Democratic Party or if liberals think that he's such this Hitler-esque figure, then give us an alternative. This is true, I guess, of what we're saying with Gaza. What's your solution then if you don't like what we're doing? and they don't have a product, they don't have a solution, and they are bleeding votes, not just from Jews, but all too many minority groups and constituencies across the country are abandoning the Democratic Party. And it's not because they suddenly became fascist. It's because they recognize the Democratic Party is not listening to our concerns.
Well, the View will die on that hill. That's the funniest thing. You watch them and we're like, this is just sad at this point.
It's everybody else's problem.
I do worry what the next pendulum swing is going to be if it's this way. So clear, like Trump is, it's insane what's happening.
So I actually think, I actually spoke about this with Ben Shapiro. I really believe that sorry, that wasn't
no, we spoke about it with him too.
The reason I said that is to validate that it's a legit opinion. Okay, we're actually scholar in residences at the Trump this Pesach, so that's my flag.
At the Trump?
The Trump Doral.
Oh, cool.
I did a set there last year. Didn't go great. Next.
I was there. I was there.
You were there last year when I was up?
Yeah, we spoke about this.
Oh.
I've been at the Doral for 5 years.
Oh. What'd you think of my set?
I liked it.
Okay.
I stayed.
Okay, good. So did Ben.
Not a raving review.
Yeah, I liked it.
How are you coming back this pace?
Well, you know your RNC speech? I liked it.
Screw you.
I had a fun time. It was a mixed crowd. Pesach programs are hard gigs.
Can you just give the RNC speech? Like
that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm running out of material. Like, what else do you want to talk about?
Yontif,
I graduated.
You doing it during Yontif, or what's your slot?
I don't think, because it's a very, very modern program, I don't actually think we have things on Chol Hamoed. Like most people go to the beach and everything, so it's really just on Yontif. We're stuck in the hotel.
Okay, so
you're
talking.
Great. The Trump Doral is the best program out there. So I mentioned it is. They did not pay me to say that. I really believe it to be the case. I love it.
The best program out there, Trump Doral. You're not. Yeah. Anyway.
By the way, he comes. He plays golf for a day or two, and he's at the Doral, and he gives a big speech.
And it comes on Yontif, and everyone who doesn't, it's a big test of who keeps Yontif. Because the phones come out, and I'm like, naughty.
It really is, by the way.
The Park East, Upper East Side Jews take out their phones.
It separates the types of modern Orthodox communities.
All of a sudden, the phones come out.
I think you're allowed to if it's the president.
With your left hand.
Yeah, there's a header. It's header Trump.
It's hilarious.
Anyway, so I raised this point, and it's not really my point. It's not an original point. But Trump, it's ironic because he's considered this Hitler-esque figure. He's a fascist who's going to take us back to the 30s. He's actually incredibly philo-Semitic. In fact, when I had this conversation with Ben, it was at the grave of the Lubavitcher Rebbe that we were waiting for Trump to accompany him. Right. And we bring up this point, or it was really his point, if we're being honest. Trump is so philo-Semitic, judging by what he just said on Gaza 2 days ago, that he actually keeps the anti-Semites in the far right relatively at bay. There's a reason why Candace Owens, I'm sorry to say, has sort of been disbanded. There's a reason why Tucker Carlson is sort of relegated to the far right corners. It's because Trump is pro-Israel, he is pro-Jewish, and that is the party line, and you toe the party line. What I'm concerned about is the MAGA movement seems to really center around Trump as an individual. I won't use the term cult of personality because that's not true, but Trump can bring about ideologies that are so foreign to the conservative base, but people are kind of okay with it because Trump does it. And I'm not convinced at all that the MAGA movement will simply solidify itself to someone like J.D. Vance, who's considered the heir apparent to MAGA. I don't think MAGA actually has that many loyalties to anyone outside of Trump.
Interesting.
And I am very concerned that in 2028, you are going to have a lot of the far right, isolationist, anti-Semitic, anti-Israel that are being relegated right now. I do think you'll see a lot of them come to the forefront and even run for president of the United States.
They're there in the umbrella. Trump is like, shh. I think the thing that I noticed is that when the far right elements, the real ugly stuff that came out over the last year, feel also disenfranchised in every other way because they don't feel they have representation in the presidency, like a Biden or a Kamala, and they blame the Jews for that.
Right.
But Trump, and I've heard this point also, not just Ben, like I was talking to my father about it. He's like, I think Trump will keep them all quiet. Not in some sort of like allegiance to them, but they feel that he at least represents them in all these other ways, and they'll let Israel or Jewish stuff go. But they are getting marginalized within the move. Like there was a cleaning house that took place once Trump won. It's like, okay, everyone came together, even the ugly elements and all these maybe people who were once left wing came together to support Trump.
Yeah.
And now it's like you're seeing people being a little more fine-tuned over their associations. And there were certain folks in the far right corners I didn't see in D.C., making their rounds at the balls and things like that.
I mean, I know for a fact that both at the inauguration...
Tucker is a different beast. It's a different force to be reckoned with.
But...
I mean, it's a problem. I think it's a problem. I mean, I've been doing some Tucker online.
Yes, I saw you ordering at a restaurant.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I think we should get the steak. I'm appalled by steak. It's very unhealthy. I love it for myself, my children. What? Yeah, both sides of his mouth. I mean, I just had the steak. Yeah.
I know that at the inauguration and at the convention, those far right elements were deliberately kept at bay. The RNC and the Trump campaign were very proactive to make sure that they were not around and they were not invited. And sort of to bolster your claim, is the reason you had so much anti-Semitism on the left is because they didn't have a leader. I mean, Biden was so weak and ineffective. And even Biden supporters would concede that point.
Yeah. They have a point. Protesters have a point. Yeah.
That's why they had to...
Because he wasn't strongly distancing himself, so they were able to flourish.
They had to make all sides
as opposed to
happy.
Trump, who is unapologetically Philo-Semitic.
If you try to appease
That's a good
all
point.
sides, you will not appease anyone. And that's what happened to the Democratic Party.
100%.
At some point, you have to put on your big boy pants and say that this is not who we are as a party. These are not the ideologies we subscribe to. And
I can't because I shot my pants. Gotta change my pants.
And dare
big boy pants. Yeah.
And dare I say, we don't want your vote.
Yeah.
There's a reason that all of these protests, I'll use a sort of a different example. Just Stop Oil. They're the people who interrupt Broadway shows and the highways in London to talk about Just Stop Oil. There's a reason they're not doing it in China and they're not doing it in Russia. They're doing it in the United Kingdom because in the UK, both the police and the government will accommodate it. They're not going to like it, but they'll allow it.
What are you advocating for?
So too, why is there anti-Semitism in the Democratic Party? Because they kind of allow it. You don't have people who are taking a hard line saying, this is not who we
Tolerant
are.
of intolerance.
It's called the paradox of tolerance, which is in order to preserve tolerance, sometimes you have to be intolerant. Right. We should be intolerant to those who seek to propagate cancel culture, who seek to destroy the American capitalist system, who seek to alienate the Jewish community. Here he goes.
Here we rein him in. Okay. Shabbos is off the list. No, here's the thing.
We should.
You are making a profound point. I don't know if you realize it, but it's really interesting that the people who have the Trump derangement or are hysterical about anti-Semitism under Trump versus those of us who see the anti-Semitism under a Biden, which means not that he's anti-Semitic, but that what's allowed and what's not called out under sort of the left of center Democratic establishment is this left-wing anti-Semitism that's kind of allowed to flourish and not be called out, versus in the Trump camp, the anti-Semitism that you do see in the far-right circles is very clearly distanced and pushed away as Trump unapologetically stands with Israel and stands with the Jewish community. And so he's not afraid. Everyone's like, he's appealing to the base. He's appealing to those words. I'm like, no, he's not. He's unappealing to the base. The Groypers have turned on him
Nick
because
Fuentes
of that.
supported Kamala Harris.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's that's a big difference. Even though they're both there, I've also, not only have I said the anti-Semitism on the left is so much more pervasive in society in general, like in media and in academia, even corporate America, but the saner voices in the movement and on the left of the aisle are not calling it out effectively, as opposed to Trump, who certainly is. So that I'm still keeping my eye on it though, for the pendulum swinging in some way. I hear you.
I'd be concerned for the future.
Yeah, I'm concerned. I think we're entering into an insane period of American history.
Right now, we're in 4 years.
Now it's just going to get insane, and in 4 years, I think we're going to look back on Trump and go, "Oh, that was fun."
You don't think it's the golden age, Michael?
Remember when it was still kind of fun?
You don't think it's the golden age?
I think it's fun now.
Do I think it's a golden age? Yeah. I feel
because you got very nervous the other day.
Culturally, I think it's felt great when Trump won, and it's better than it was 2 years ago. But I think this is like a little calm before the storm. That's how I feel.
Meaning it's like a reset. We think we're here, but the actual tag at the end of the movie is
because what Shab is saying, when you actually think about who will come next and what will
what's
come
the
next,
post-credit scene, Michael?
There are no answers.
Who is it? It's a trans Obama. Big Mike. Who's in the post-credit scene? We think the movie's
Claudine
over.
Gay, she reappears.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe Hillary comes back.
Oh my God.
I also think, because again, speculating and predicting in politics is such a fool's errand. But what I will say is, it could be Trump was an anomaly. And yes, he broke the political establishment, but that was unique to him. And now that he's out of the picture, people can't really get away with what Trump was able to get away. I remember when some of these Trump rallies, when they would play these videos of Joe Biden, and it was like the same 2 or 3 videos of him saying the same from 7 years ago when he said like 2 or 3 dumb things. And they could really hone in on that. Trump says a lot of those things, but when there's so much to focus on, it's hard to focus on anyything in particular. And
he also means it. He's authentic, so you can't call him out on authenticity.
I just mean there's
it's foolproof.
Yeah.
Like,
So I think we might
Sorry.
actually restore the political order with Trump out. Who knows?
I don't think right and left exists in a way anymore that the old order can be restored.
When
who
I
wants
say,
the old order?
No, when I say order, what it
was
means
stable.
is when a
It was
politician,
stable.
Civil.
right?
Yeah.
What I mean
You're
by
talking
that-
like Bush, Obama, or
was-
Bush.
I'm not saying it worked for everybody, but like stability is good for
Right.
Jews.
No, in my mind, a political order is when a politician lies, the media calls him out, and it becomes a scandal. When there's some type of extramarital affair, there's accountability. These are things that weren't really a problem with Trump because, again, there were so many accusations that people just became numb to it. But if you're a Pete Buttigieg on the left, or if you're Ron DeSantis on the right, why did Ron DeSantis campaign? One second, why did it explode? Implode, because he wore heels. And the Trump campaign was able to attack him that he wore heels. And it's a silly thing, but other politicians, they simply are held to a different standard in a way that Trump kind of never was, rightly or wrongly.
but what's your point?
I'm answering your question. My point is yes, we have this fear of, even though Trump is holding the anti-Semitism at bay, and maybe in 2028 they become the mainstream, it could also be that no, we just enter we resort back to the old ways where
sorry, I remember you
anti-Semitism
said that.
is
You said
always
that.
bad.
Yeah, it's like a
And there's
reset to common sense, which includes
Kind of.
anti-Semitism being bad.
Yeah,
Right.
and you
I hear
kinda
that.
can't
Yeah,
say
I hear
my
that. I don't think so, but I hear
African-American
you.
friend, which
Yeah.
is what Trump says the whole time, and
Yeah.
it's kind of
Nah,
rather
but the
numb to
only
it,
thing
or
I'll
it's
say is
funny.
the reason
it's not racist.
the
but
reason
it's
the
like funny.
the reason
Other
the
people can't say that.
The reason the attacks on Trump didn't work the way they do against other politicians is Trump doesn't pretend to be a squeaky clean.
That's true.
I'm married happily. Like these other guys put on a facade, and they're all Trump on the inside. They just don't want you to know. Trump wanted you to know, and so throwing things at him like, "Hey, you're exaggerating." I exaggerate all the time. That's what I do. Bombastic, as opposed to if Bernie Sanders got caught with the Billy Bush tape or Obama, they'd be in trouble because they're presenting a brand of polished, squeaky clean
Right.
people. Trump's the junkyard dog. That's why they like him.
Right, so Bernie Sanders presents himself as
Grab him by the.
Right. Bernie Sanders
99%.
presents himself as a socialist, which is why we can attack him for owning 3 homes.
Yeah.
Trump, he'll say, of course I didn't pay any income tax, because why would I?
Yeah.
Because fuck the system, and if I can game it legally, why wouldn't I?
We got an F-bomb from
sorry.
Shabby.
Hey,
Yes.
sorry.
That we have to we do a little.
Oh,
dance.
you bleeped
Yeah,
it.
we
No,
just-
sorry.
that was
No,
the
not
game.
at all. Okay, we're gonna wrap up soon. It's been super fun. What's next for Shabbos Kestenbaum? Give me the. You're fresh out of grad school now. When did you
Yeah.
You're hitting the circuit.
Hitting the circuit.
He's out on the prowl,
So,
ladies.
If any of your listeners want to help pay for my rent, then
Yep.
please hire me.
Okay.
What's
But
your
like
address?
you were telling me about certain things going on, which are like in the official capacity, unofficial capacity, whatever you can talk about.
Yeah, sure.
People are going to be seeing a lot of you. So
So first of all, we are the first case in American history pertaining to the civil rights violations of Jews on a college campus to go to trial. That, no matter what my personal capacity or professional capacity is, that will be what I most focus on is this lawsuit. Because
watch
it's
out,
not
OJ.
It's not about me. It's not even about Harvard. But it's showing that American Jews are sick and tired of being sick and tired, and we want to preserve the golden age of American Jewry. And it's young American Jews who are pathing that chart forward. So that will take up a lot of my time. I do hope to enter the political world. Whether that's elected office, maybe in an ideal world, I would love to primary Jerry Nadler. This is a guy who fell asleep when I gave testimony. This is a guy who criticizes both Israel and the United States incessantly, and I would love to get him out of Congress. But who knows? I know whatever I do.
Sleepy Joe and Sleepy Nadler. Yeah.
Sleepy Nadler. I do know whatever I do, it will be in service of the American Jewish community. And as I mentioned, I'll be meeting Bibi tomorrow, which I'm very excited about. And I will make the case that yes, we need help. Yes, we need resources being allocated to the diasporic communities. But ultimately, we are so incredibly proud to be in this fight. And American Jews, at least young American Jews, are not abandoning Jewish values. We're not abandoning the land of Israel, and we're not abandoning the United States of America. So that will probably manifest itself
In what order? Just kidding.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, I was thinking because Henry Kissinger, Golda Meir, it's a little awkward.
Well, it
But
depends,
how
right?
that manifests itself, I'm not sure just yet. Probably something in politics. But I know it will always be me speaking out in ways that I could be of help.
You still have the romanticized view of DC, which is cute. I think you.
For now, I do.
Yeah, which is nice that you can do good over there before it chews you up and spits you out.
Look, at the end of the day, it's
But maybe
policymakers, yes, are two-faced, and there's always a secret agenda, of course. But at the end of the day, how do you get legislation passed? It's through the political process.
Yeah.
Legislation is what affects change.
It might be
If
where
we-
you belong,
if,
you know?
If we want to tax the endowments and deport the students and withhold the funds and get rid of DEI, it's
Yeah.
politics, and it's
Yeah.
messy and it's dirty and it's not very moral. But it's just how the game is played.
Do you ever see yourself, last question, going back to the Democratic Party and working from within to change it?
In an ideal world, yes.
Taurus
But-
Kestenbaum, 2028.
Well, I once did an event with the congressman.
Richie and Shabbos.
I once did an event with the congressman.
It's like a sitcom. Richie and Shabbos going to D.C. running for your vote. Richie and Shabbos.
We might not look alike, but we think alike.
Beautiful.
We did an event with the congressman like a year ago with other Jewish students, and I had said on that panel to I think it was a fundraiser. I said I'm a proud Torres progressive. So when people say, "How can you still be a Democrat?" I say, "Look at Richie Torres."
You drop the Taurus card, you're fine. There's
Yeah,
a few
exactly.
people you can say.
But again, I'm not going to be at a place where I'm not welcomed. That's true of Harvard, and it'll be true of the Democratic Party. And if they will not make concessions, if they will not meet with us, if they will not treat us in the same way they treat other groups, then I'm not going to entertain this whole change from within. Because as I said, the best way to change is holding people accountable, is losing elections, is losing lawsuits. That will create fundamental reforms.
So you're a Jew who's going to the halls of power to control everything.
Exactly.
Put him on a poster.
Shabbos Kestenbaum, ladies and gentlemen. What an impressive guy, huh?
Oh, thank
I'm
you.
inspired.
Speaking of miles and miles a minute, I can barely keep up, but I hope you kept up for an enlightening conversation with the future of American Jewish advocacy, Shabbos Kestenbaum.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Shabbos.
Thanks for watching. Good Shabbos.